Based on origin, resources can be classified into natural and human resources. It is human beings who add value to natural resources and make them useful. Natural resources. These are the gifts of nature which are found useful for making the life of human beings comfortable and worth living. Natural resources include natural vegetation, soil, water, air, minerals, and even rocks. These can be of two main types, biotic and abiotic. A. Biotic resources. These are living resources like forests and forest products, agriculture, animals, birds, marine life, etc.
B. Abiotic resources. These are material resources or non-living things. Minerals like iron ore, copper, land resources, soils, etc. are some such examples. Human resources. These are the human beings who are made valuable through education, training, experience, or in other ways, so that they may become capable of making use of other resources efficiently.
Based on renewability. Depending on whether they are replenishable or not, there are two main types of resources, renewable and non-renewable. Renewable resources. These resources can be renewed after use. They do not get exhausted. Renewable resources are water, forests, soils, etc. Some trees may also take longer time to grow. For example, it takes between 50 to 200 years for a tree to grow in a forest. Availability of fresh and pure water in a river may be obtained under certain conditions of environment. Non-renewable resources. These resources get exhausted after use. Resources which cannot be replenished are fossil fuels such as petroleum, gas, coal, and other minerals. Based on utility. Based on their use and utility, resources are classified into energy resources and raw materials. Energy resources. Coal, gas, petroleum, water power, and even certain minerals like uranium are used for generation of electricity or as fuels for transport vehicles. Based on utility. Raw materials. Mineral, vegetation, agricultural products, animals, etc. form raw materials for production of goods. Even coal, gas, and petroleum, which are used as energy resources, may also be used as raw materials for production of chemicals, fertilizers, etc. Based on ownership. Individual resources. These resources are privately owned by individuals or groups, for example, land owned by an individual, a family or groups of people organized in companies. Based on ownership. Community-owned resources. Adivasis do not consider private ownership of land, forests, and water bodies. They consider these resources as owned by the community. These type of resources are public land, parks, wealth, playgrounds in panchayat ghars, in urban and rural areas. These resources are based on ownership. National resources. These resources are owned by the government. In the past, all land, water, and other natural resources were owned by the government. Even today, the government owns such resources of general public use as railways, irrigation, dams, and buildings. based on ownership. International resources. These resources are owned by international institutions like the United Nations or other regional international organizations. Beyond the territorial waters, as stated earlier, oceans are often treated as open. These oceanic resources beyond exclusive economic zones belong to many nations. Development of resources. Potential resources. It is the total quantity of a particular mineral or resource found existing in nature. The survey determines such quantities. Actual resources. These resources are those that have been surveyed and their reserves properly determined for actual use. Reserve. It is that proportion of potential resources which can be exploited and developed economically in stages. Technology makes it possible to convert a resource into a reserve. Reserves are like actual deposits from which withdrawals can be made. The development of these resources proceeds in 3 stages. Survey. It is used in establishing the location of resource. It is followed by exploration. Mining. The method of extraction of mineral resources from under the ground is called mining. Ore. Minerals or their combinations are found in beds or seams, which are called ores. Metals and non-metals are obtained from ores. Sustainable development and the role of the United Nations. The United Nations is today concerned with a large number of global issues on conservation. The second Earth Summit was held in September 2002 in Johannesburg in South Africa. Appropriately titled World Summit on Sustainable Development WSSD, it focused on economic development for regeneration of resources. The United Nations sponsored the first Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Its theme was Environment and Development. The conference turned out to be the largest congregation of world leaders in history. It produced some binding treaties to reduce pollution in order to prevent global warming. It was at the conference that the concept of sustainable development was evolved and given shape.